A city of the future that embraced its traditional roots while harboring dark secrets. By day, it adheres to strict rules and displays restraint, yet, at night, it shatters moral norms. In Tokyo, one of the world's largest cities, encounters with thousands of people daily in streets, public transport or workplaces reveal nothing of the eerie skeletons hiding in their closets. Despite Tokyo's grandeur and beauties, it's a place where human monsters inevitably reveal themselves. Today, we delve into infamous cases that have not only shaped Tokyo's global reputation as a city of the future, but also as a breeding ground for monstrous individuals in human guise. Now you're looking at a photo of the arrest of a woman who took the lives of at least dozens of babies. A high-profile case, the gruesome details of which, like a chill, have spread around the world. Today we will learn how a simple midwife became a famous infanticide and how this case influenced Japanese legislation. So this story begins in February 1987, when Miyuki Kamaru was born in a small village on the island of Kyushu in southern Japan. Nothing is known about the girl's parents, but from Miyuki's later life we can conclude that the family was wealthy. In her hometown, Miyuki graduated from a vocational school at a hospital and received midwifery skills. And at the age of 18, she moved to Tokyo. In September in 1919, a midwifery training department was founded at the Tokyo Imperial University Hospital. Thanks to her education at the vocational school, she qualified without any exams and was included in the list of midwives in Tokyo Prefecture a month later. At that time, university education was a privilege for wealthy families and was highly valued in society. Therefore, as a university graduate, Miss Komaru was able to find a job quickly. In 1919, Miss Miyuki got a job at a Katabuki Maternity Hospital at the Shinjuku district in Tokyo. In the same year, Miyuki's parents chose her fiancé. It was Takeshi Ishikawa, a boy 3 years older than her from Ibaraki Prefecture. Miyuki's future husband studied at an agricultural school, but even then he felt that the industry was not right for him. Takeshi already had a young son from a previous marriage. It is unclear whether the young people knew each other before or whether the girl's parents simply played at the good old marriage of convenience, but the couple got married anyway. Miyuki traditionally took her husband's surname, Ishikawa, which would soon become known not only throughout Japan, but also for beyond its borders. The newly married couple moved in together. The child from Takeshi's first marriage was not being raised together. They look like an ordinary family with their own family traditions, sometimes quarreling over trifles, but loving each other. The couple could not have their own biological children, as Miyuki had undergone a hysterectomy, an operation to remove her uterus. It seems like a very complicated and serious operation for those times, but it went smoothly, and the woman continued to live as she had before. Takeshi and Miyuki adopted 3 more children, 2 boys and 1 girl. Counting Takeshi's son from her first marriage, that's 4 children. So they are definitely not a childless family. 2 years later, Takeshi dropped out an agricultural school and volunteered to join the military police, where he rose to the rank of sergeant. He later worked for the Metropolitan Police Department until 1926, when he resigned to help his wife with her business. Miyuki's career path led her to the position of director of the Kotobuki-Sanin Maternity Hospital. She became almost the best midwife in the city, and women in labor tried to get to Miyuki. Over the years, she became influential and well known in the midwifery community. To continue the story of our current heroine, we need to move a little farther away from her and look at global events. In 1938, the Second World War began, in which 61 countries took part. Japan became an ally of Germany and Italy in an attempt to grab more land. Back then, the land of the rising sun was completely different compared to today. So when the Japanese Imperial Army entered the war, it was fighting, let's say, on the wrong side. I will not go into historical details because today we will be talking about how the war affected the lives of ordinary Japanese and the Ishikawa family. During the war period, the country suffered an economic crisis, and ordinary people found it very difficult to make ends meet. They had to stand in line for hours to get a plate of ramen. Consequently, giving birth and raising children was a challenge for most families. But women could not terminate their pregnancies either. At the time, the country had a law that categorically banned abortion. Even if a woman tried to terminate her pregnancy, she could be sentenced to up to 1 year in prison, and the doctor who performed an abortion could be sentenced to 7 years in prison. The government has been discussing the abortion law for some time, but no concrete decision have been made. Added to this was the complete absence of the mechanical, chemistry or any other form of contraception. In short, we have hundreds of unwanted pregnancies and partners of unborn children who cannot or do not want to raise them. This is all very terrible and frightening, of course, but not as frightening as what happened at the Kotobuki Sanin's maternity hospital. I remember that Miyuki Ishikawa was a fairly successful midwife at the time, and her husband began to help out at the hospital, keeping records and monitoring patients. In 1943, the Ishikawa set up a maternity hospital where they delivered babies to mothers who did not want to keep their children. These were usually women from poor neighborhoods, widows of soldiers killed in the war, dancers, maids and prostitutes. Anyone who did not have the financial means to raise a child. It was a kind of orphanage for unwanted children, and Miyuki volunteered to take care of them. The Ishikawa couple placed advertisements in several newspapers, saying that they were taking in children, boys and girls aged 1 month to 3 years, and would look after them in their maternity home. The Ishikawa couple asked for 2,000 to 10,000 yen, about $5 to $30 at the exchange rate of the time, to take in the children, which was a lot of money at the time. In return, the mothers gave up all rights to their children, and Ishikawa promised to take care of them and find them a foster family. Mothers who went to the home to give birth paid a fee of 2,000 yen. Foster families also had to pay a fee, but the couple only charged 500 yen. Times got tougher, and soon there were no foster families for babies, but Ishikawa continued to take new babies for their maternity home, because it was good money. Eventually, Mrs. Miyuki Ishikawa realized that the house was not made of rubber, and she had nowhere to put the babies, so she decided that it would be better and easier to just let the children die. And I say let them die because this wasn't murder in the usual sense, because there was no active action that led to anyone's death. On the contrary, there was a complete lack of it. The babies were given half as much milk, and they were no longer bathed or changed nappies. Miyuki justifies all this by saying that there were more children and the budget was the same. But money was paid for each child, you might say. And yes, it was, but Miyuki had other plans for the money. The babies suffered from hunger and cold for long hours, days, weeks. Why didn't anyone come to the children's aid? Because, as you know, all babies scream when they need something. And so it was. The children screamed at the beginning, but it turned out that there comes a time when the child subconsciously understands that no one will come and save him. Then they become silent and just lie quietly until their last breath. The atmosphere that prevailed in those years, and this was practiced for 5 years, is simply scary to imagine. The maternity hospital, which is usually associated with the happiness of giving life, became a death chamber under the leadership of Miyuki Ishikawa. Personally, it reminds me of the Nazi concentration camps created as a tool for the complete extermination of people. Children were dying of hunger, thirst, and in the winter of cold. This scheme was supplemented by Miyuki Takeshi's husband, as well as their mutual friend and maternity ward worker, Dr. Shiro Nakayama. The husband of our brilliant lady became responsible for collecting money from the parents who could not even imagine that they were paying for the torture and death of their child. The good Dr. Nakayama played the role of kind of counterfeiter who issued death certificates stating that the child has died of natural causes. There is more. The scheme with the neglect of babies proved to be effective. The couple earned a fortune from it and even managed to buy themselves a personal phone and a car, which for a moment was a rarity in those days and cost a fortune for ordinary Japanese people. If we calculate that Miyuki took care of 100 children a year for each of whom she received 6,000 yen, then she made about 500,000 yen a year in profit. This is with all expenses you can think of for that baby. Just think about it, this is just colossal money for Japan at that time. It was like manna from heaven for Miyuki. Meanwhile, the maternity ward was a living hell. Employees could not stand to spend even a couple of days in Ishikawa Hospital, so they quit immediately after being hired. Those who had the stamina to stay longer kept asking Miyuki to increase the amount of milk to feed the children and to heat the hospital better in winter, but all she would do was order them to silently carry out their tasks and mind their own business. One of the midwives, whose name we don't know, worked for Miyuki Ishikawa for a year. She was eager to learn the art of delivering and caring for babies from the experienced lady, but she did not come close to gaining the knowledge she wanted. Eventually, she couldn't take it anymore and quit. Among the hospitalized patients, there were also rumors that they were being watched over by demon midwives. There were cases of patients running away from the hospital before giving birth because they were simply afraid for themselves and their children. So why didn't any of the patients or former employees report the incident to the police? Some sources claim that the local authorities knew what was happening but did nothing because they simply did not care. They blamed it on natural causes and forgot about the hospital. It is not known what really happened, but it was clear. Miyuki didn't try to hide her crimes. All of her former employers knew about them. It's just that none of them stopped her. It became increasingly difficult to continue burying the bodies unnoticed, as the number of bodies grew. On the night of 12 January 1948, the police department activated all its forces checking passers-by. This was because a series of horrific attacks had recently taken place in Tokyo, and the police had to find the culprit. So, two policemen spotted Mr. Nagasaki, an undertaker, 54 years old, riding a bicycle to the Ishikawa house. As they watched, the policeman witnessed him putting the corpses of 4 babies in a box, loading it on the rack of his bicycle, and riding away from the maternity hospital. This raised questions for the police, so they stopped Mr. Nagasaki, who was carrying a wooden box measuring approximately 45 centimeters on his bicycle. Upon inspections, 4 bodies of babies were found in the box. He said that he was carrying 4 bodies from maternity hospital for burial. He had a permit to do so there was no reason to detain the man. So Mr. Nagasaki went on with his business. However, there was something that stuck with the police in this story. A simple coincidence brought them closer to the horrific truth that was hiding behind the walls of that maternity hospital. That same day, 2 officers told their superior at the police department about the incident, and he in turn ordered them to ask their neighbors in the streets about the maternity hospital from which the children's bodies had been taken, just to be on the safe side. This unobtrusive search led to an unknown witness who said that he had been inside the maternity hospital and that the children there seemed very neglected. When this information reached the chief of police, he immediately ordered that the corpses of the children, which the undertaker was carrying in a box, be sent for autopsy and examination. The autopsy showed that all 4 children had died of malnutrition. The Ishikawa couple and the undertaker Nagasaki were immediately summoned for the questioning by the police department. Around this time, a 5th child died in the maternity ward. Miyuki Ishikawa explained the deaths of the 5 children by saying that they had started using milk powder to feed their children on 3rd January and had not yet learned how to prepare it properly, so the children contracted dysentery and died. A very simple and straightforward explanation. It doesn't really exonerate Miyuki or any of her accomplices, but it's a very concise way of putting it. She didn't learn how to make formula from milk powder in her 6th year of caring for babies, so what can you do? And neither Miyuki nor her husband had an explanation for the other death, except for the fact that there were many children. It was difficult to record them all and calculate the portions for them. For some reason, explanation like "I was getting really good money for this, so I went fine with it," Miss Ishikawa could not come up with. On 15 January, Miyuki Ishikawa was arrested. Also arrested were her husband, Takeshi Ishikawa, a doctor, Shiro Nakayama, an assistant midwife who had worked for Miyuki for a year, and an undertaker who was found to be selling corpses for 500 yen each. The number of deaths at this maternity hospital has never been established. The hospital's records were very confusing, and it took the police a long time to go through them all and sort them out. Over a period of 5 years, 208 children were registered in a hospital's records, and 84 burial permits were applied for. This means that almost half of the children from the Ishikawa home did not survive. This is a nightmare. And this is just what was recorded. The investigation revealed that at least 211 children were simply not registered, so the exact number of victims cannot be known. During the search of the Ishikawa couple's maternity hospital, the following notes were made.
At the time of the inspection, there were 5 babies on a bamboo bed upstairs in the nursery, 4 of whom were crying and appeared to be very sick. The 5th baby looked healthier than the others. The clothes and linen on the bed were dirty, but the room itself was clean. 2 mothers and their newborn babies were in the delivery room, and 2 other women with babies were in each of the postnatal care rooms. The level of cleanliness was the same as in the nursery. There was no water supply to the 2nd floor. All the water had to be brought up steep stairs from the 1st floor.
5 of the surviving children were taken by the police to the First National Hospital, but 2 more of Miyuki's children died there. The mothers with newborns who were in Ishikawa's house at the time took their babies and left, although we understand the woman planned to leave them in the maternity ward for adoption. It seems that these children were very lucky to escape the cruel care of Miss Miyuki. In court, Miss Ishikawa claimed that she was not responsible for the deaths of all those infants. Rather, their parents were to blame, as they abandoned their children and left them in her care. Although such a statement would sound absurd to us today, at that time in Japan, Miyuki's defense received considerable support. The fact is that in those days, an infant in Japan had almost no rights, meaning that in some sense, the death of an infant was not considered the death of a person, as a full-fledged individual. Only 27 deaths were examined in court, as the police department could not present more evidence. Moreover, during the hearings, only 5 deaths were taken into account and recognized as the fault of the Ishikawa couple and their accomplices. For the remaining 22 deaths, the Monstrous were acquitted due to a lack of evidence. On September 8, 1948, the Tokyo District Court sentenced Miyuki Ishikawa to 15 years in prison. Miyuki's husband was sentenced to 7 years in prison, and his assistant received 3 years. It is unclear who exactly the assistant was in this version, whether it was the undertaker or Dr. Nakayama. In any case, on October 11 of the same year, the sentences were almost halved, with Miyuki now having 8 years and Takeshi and Nakayama each having 4 years. The undertaker and the assistant's midwife who assigned Miyuki for a whole year were also tried. The assistant was found not guilty, as she was nothing more than a servant of Ishikawa and had no influence over the mentor. However, the governor of Tokyo issued an order banning her from practicing midwifery. As for the undertaker, I did not find specific information, but it is likely that he was the one given the 3 years as Miyuki's husband's assistant. So now the logical question arises, which I believe everyone has. Where is the fair justice? Why did the guilty receive such a meager sentence for so many deaths? As already mentioned, only 5 deaths were recognized by the court. The nature of the crime played into the criminals' hands. They were guilty not for what they did, but of what they did not do. In other words, the crime excludes the active participation of the couple, making the case difficult for the court to consider. Moreover, in 1952, these monsters still filed appeals in court, as they disagree with the sentences of 8 and 4 years. Once again, the case was so ambitious that the proving their guilt became increasingly difficult with each new hearing. So their sentences were reviewed and again halved, meaning Miyuki now had to serve 4 years, and for her husband, 2. The prosecution in turn also filed appeals against the Ishikawa couple, but all of them were rejected by the court. This case prompted the country's leadership to reconsider its abortion policy, and after long debates in 1948 to prevent similar incidents in the future, a law was passed legalizing abortions, which is now known as the Mother's Body Protection Law. Just think about it. The case was so significant that it led to changes in the law of the entire country. Miyuki herself was released in 1953, and after prison, she continued to live in her house, which was no longer a maternity home, and tried to rent out 3 rooms. She did not lose her entrepreneurial spirit, this time engaging in the sale of soap, creams and fish. In 1968, she gave an interview published in a magazine under a pseudonym, in which she again claimed that she was not guilty of the children's death, and that she did everything possible for those infants. At the time of the interview, her husband was already dead, and nothing was known about the fate of the other accomplices. Likewise, nothing is known about the couple's 4 children. The history remains silent. The lawyer who defended Miyuki Ishikawa in court said that she was now running a real estate office in central Tokyo, and also boasted to him that she has built herself a huge and luxurious tomb. He suggested that she had already earned up to 100 million yen. Miyuki Ishikawa, who caused the deaths of numerous infants, met her own death in May 1987, at the age of 19. The Otaku Killer. The next case has some similarities with the previous one, as this Tokyo monster also had serial child murder of his consequence. However, unlike Miyuki Ishikawa, who killed through inaction, this scoundrel acted with particular cruelty and left no doubt about his intentions. He kidnapped, killed and sent the bones through the mail. This inhuman monster tormented not only his victims, but also their families. What created this monster? Why is everyone interested in his ends? And what does anime have to do with it? Let's figure it out. Tsutomu Miyazaki was born on August 21, 1962 in the town of Itsukachi, Tokyo Prefecture. The boy's family had a good reputation in the city. His grandfather and great-grandfather served on a city council, and his parent owned a regional newspaper that was quite profitable. However, the arrival of their first child was a difficult period for the couple, as the boy was born with a serious hand pathology. Let me say right away, all those photos supposedly of Tsutomu's hands that you might find you decide to Google him are actually the hands of a person with Marfan syndrome, characterized by extreme slenderness, long limbs, scoliosis, and extraordinary joint flexibility. Tsutomu's abnormality was called congenital bilateral synostosis, which involved fused wrist joints, making it impossible to rotate them. For Tsutomu, his hands became a sore spot. From early childhood, he developed a complex about them. At the age of 4, Tsutomu learned that surgery on his hands would not help. Even then, a little boy had to come to terms with the fact that neither his parents nor the doctors could help him. Adding to this trauma were constant bullying and humiliation from his peers. We all know how cruel children can be, but the worst part is when adults do not respond, as was the case with a kindergarten teacher who simply ignored the constant insult directed at Miyazaki, which he described as very painful. That it wasn't just the teacher, his own parent didn't find time, or perhaps didn't think it necessary, to listen to and support their child, who had been enduring very difficult trials since birth. In all his failures, the boy blamed his condition. He was very ashamed of his hand, trying to cover them, hide them, so he wouldn't have to see surprised or frightening looks and explain why his hands were the way they were. Even in the photos of Miyazaki we have today, it's clear how he hides his hands from the camera behind his back or covers them with long sleeves. Tsutomu's father was a careerist who prioritized work over his family and didn't care for his household. His mother always placed respectability above the well-being and happiness of the family, so she did not show love to her son. Most of their time was devoted to their business, leaving little for the child. Later, the couple had two more daughters, from whom the parents somehow found time. Tsutomu was raised by his grandfather and a man with intellectual disability, whom his parents hired as a nanny. In elementary school, Tsutomu Miyazaki became fascinated with various monsters, earning him the nickname Dr. Monster. He wasn't popular in class and had almost no friends, but in all other respects, he was ordinary student. Some subjects came easier to him, some harder, and after classes, he attended various sports clubs. In 1978, he began attending a boys' middle school in Tokyo, where his academic performance quickly declined. He simply lost interest in studying. His classmates described him as a gloomy and quiet boy, so he didn't make friends there either. One of his classmates turned out to be the actor Meiyo Kawasaki, who said in the interview after Tsutomu's arrest,
"There were 80 people in our class, and I have a good memory, so I remember him well and probably never will forget, but I think there are those who managed to." I asked some of our classmates, and it turned out none of them remembered him. He was a shadow.
In 1981, Miyazaki entered a junior college in Tokyo, majoring in photographic technology. After graduating, he got a job at a printing company in Kodaira City. He worked as a printing press operator, but he had a terrible attitude towards his work. In 1986, he was offered to transfer to another city, but he refused and resigned voluntarily. After that, he returned to his parents' home, where they hoped he would start working in the family business like they did. However, Tsutomu had no interest in this. He stayed in his room for months, watching movies, anime, and reading manga. In Japan, there is a specific term for people with this lifestyle, hikikomori, which means a recluse, a young person who does not wish to socialize, and instead spends all their time in their room or apartment. They limit communication with friends or have none at all, and live off their parents. They can spend months or even years in their room. This is a significant problem in Japan today, as the number of recluses is increasing. There are even books with advice for hikikomori and their families. Tsutomu Miyazaki spent 6 months in his room before he finally joined the family business. He started collecting advertising manuscripts for his parents' newspaper. It was an easy job and he handled it without problems. At the same time, Miyazaki tried to publish his own amateur magazine about his favorite anime. But it was not popular, so it was the first and the last time he tried to print his own work. After this failure, Miyazaki found himself in video clubs, whose members across the countries recorded anime, movies and TV programs on tapes and exchanged them with each other. This could have been an interesting way to make friends with the like-minded people, but Tsutomu kept all the recordings for himself instead. He started collecting them, and soon his room was filled with tapes from floor to ceiling. On May 16, 1988, Tsutomu's grandfather, the kind and caring man who raised his grandson while his parents were busy working and was almost the only important person in the boy's life, passed away. This was a severe blow to Miyazaki, plunging him into a deep depression and making him withdraw from the world even more. In his secluded room, Tsutomu repeatedly listened to a recording of his grandfather's dog barking near his bed, reminding him of the lost warmth of family. In an attempt to preserve something of his grandfather, he ate a portion of his ashes. This period marked a turning point for Miyazaki as he began to develop stronger desires. Most likely with his grandfather's death, he decided that the only person who loved him was gone, and now he had nothing left to lose, so there was no need to restrain himself. One day, his younger sister noticed that he was spying on her in the shower, and when she tried to chase him away, he hit her. Their mother learned about this incident immediately, and she remarked that he should spend more time working and less with those videotapes. In response, Tsutomu hit her as well. This episode did not improve the worm's relationships in family, but it seems to give Tsutomu a sense of freedom, realizing that the brute force could get him what he wanted. On August 22, 1988, in the city of Iruma, Saitama Prefecture, near Tokyo, 4-year-old Marikono disappeared. The girl had left home, telling her parents she was going to the house next door to visit a friend from kindergarten, but she never arrived. Her parents reported her missing to the police as soon as they noticed something was wrong. It was later relevant that local housewives and 2 teenage boys had seen Marie walking with a middle-aged man towards the local river. This man was Tsutomu Miyazaki. The next day, August 23, the police station, fire department and a group of the volunteers conducted a full-scale search for Marie all night and all day in the neighboring Iruma and Kasumigara rivers, as well as in irrigation canals. The girl was not found, dead or alive. Her parents were beside themselves with worry, but couldn't believe they would never see their child again. What really happened? The monster named Tsutomu Miyazaki tricked the defenseless shields and put her in his car. He became enraged and strangled her, then drove to a wooded area. A simple murder was not enough for this beast, so Tsutomu then raped the corpse, which was already in rigor mortis. He filmed all his vile acts on camera, so that he would have them on tape. After all the abuse, Tsutomu left the victim's remains somewhere in the woods near his house. He removed the victim's clothes and took her with him. After some time, Miyazaki returned to the body, cut off the arms and legs, and burned the rest. He rubbed the ashes and bones into dust and put them in a box. The monster took the arms and legs home and put them in the pantry. On 3 October that year, 7-year-old Masami Yoshizawa, a first-grade student at Harichi Municipal Elementary School in Gano, went missing. The girl had left school with a group of classmates. They stopped at the home of their classmate who had not in school that day, and then Masami disappeared, leaving her school bag at the door. She was never seen again, except of course for Miyazaki, who bumped into the girl on a country road and offered her a lift home. Miyazaki did to her what he had done to the previous victim, strangled her in the car and then mocked her body. Masami's parents reported their daughter missing the same day. The Saitama police, the police station and the fire department of Hanna City, whose center was 8 kilometers from the crime scene, were immediately mobilized to search for her. The morning of 4 October came, but no clues were found. Everything suggested that this case was directly related to deaths of Marie Kana. Both girls had disappeared near the Iruma River, about 12 kilometers from each other. Both Marie and Masami had cropped hair and disappeared in the middle of the day on Monday. Police continued to search for a link between the 2 cases. A month and a half later, on 8 December, another girl went missing. She was 4-year-old Erika Namba. Her mother had picked her up from kindergarten that day. But later Erika asked to go play with a friend who lived about 100 meters away. Her mother allowed her to do so, a decision she probably regretted. A few hours later, at around 5 p.m., Erika and her friend went outside together when it was already quite dark and walked part of the way between their houses. A woman living in neighboring apartment complex saw the girls say goodbye and go their separate ways. She lost sight of Erika behind the house, which was about 20 meters from her home. The monster abducted Erika almost from the doorstep of her own home, where her parents awaited her, unable to imagine what would happen next in their worst nightmare. The Namba family's house was near the same river in Iruma, so all the children in the area, both at kindergarten and at home, were consistently warned not to approach the water, as adults knew of 2 previous cases of children disappearing near this river. Rumors circulated that in mid-November, a man had attempted to abduct a girl from the local school, but failed. People in the area were aware of the danger to children in those days and were, as they say, on guard, but still could not foresee the tragedy that was about to unfold. And it did happen. Miyazaki drove the girl to a parking lot in Naguri town, made her undress in the back seat of his car, and began to photographing her. Afterwards, he strangled her, as he had his previous victims, tied her hands and feet, wrapped her in a bedsheet, and placed the lifeless girl in the trunk of his car. Tsutomu disposed of her clothes in a wooded area and left her body in an adjacent parking lot. On December 10, the prefectural police formed a special task force to investigate the disappearance of the girls. About 70 police officers were assigned to search for Erika, and approximately 150 members of the local community also volunteered to assist in the search. 3 days later, Erika's body was found in a parking lot where Miyazaki had left it. On December 20, Erika's grief-stricken parents received a postcard from Miyazaki with the following message. Erika, cold, cough, throat, lightly, death. On February 6, 1989, the parents of the first victim, Marie Kono, received a package. Inside the box was ashes and several partially burned bones, including a jawbone with a few teeth remaining. Investigators struggled to determine if there were indeed Marie Kono's remains. Numerous examinations initially stated that the teeth did not belong to Marie. The conclusion changed several times, but eventually it was declared that the teeth likely belonged to Marie Kono. Thus, after a long wait for a definitive answer of yes or no, they received a likely. Everything was resolved on February 10 and 11 when letters arrived at both the Kono family home and the headquarters of Asahi Shimbun, Japan's national newspaper. The package contained photos of clothing worn by the girl at the time of her disappearance and a postcard with a shocking message. Marie, bones, cremation, investigation, proof. In addition to such messages, families of the victims often complained of receiving strange silent phone calls. The phone could ring for up to 20 minutes if left unanswered, and if picked up, the person on the other side would simply remain silent and listen. Letters from the killer were sent under the name Yuko Imada, containing very specific details known only to the criminal, such as a description of the photograph of the girl that accompanied the postcard sent to the magazine's editorial office, which had not been published anywhere. On March 11, exactly a month later, new letters were delivered to the headquarters of Asahi Shimbun and to the home of the second victim, Masami Yoshizaba, titled grandiosely as a confession. The sender was the same, Yuko Imada. This letter was characterized by very sloppy handwriting, as if it written with an unsteady hand. Moreover, from a grammatical point of view, it was not entirely correct. In the Japanese language, there are two alphabets, hiragana and katakana, and each word, depending on its origin, is written in one of them. In this letter, the two alphabets were mixed, even within the same word, which was a serious mistake. The letter was written in the name of a woman who had seen Marie Kono, the first victim, bathing in the river and decided to drown her because she, herself, could not bear children. The crime was described in great details, prompting the police to consider the possibility that the perpetrator could be a woman. However, doubts remained because witnesses had seen Marie being led by a man. In March, the police recognized their special task force to investigate the case of the kidnapped girls, involving investigators from across the country. On 6 June 1989, the killer had another victim. This time, Tsutomu Miyazaki called 5-year-old Ayako Makoto, who was playing alone in the playground, and forced her to follow him for about 5 meters, so that no one would suspect anything wrong. Then he put her in his car and drove off. A few minutes later, the girl noticed his hand and said something about them. This triggered an old trauma for Tsutomu, and he became angry and immediately strangled the child and warped her body in a sheet. This time Miyazaki took him to his apartment when he would not be disturbed. He spent the next 2 days at home, along with the child's corpse, taunting him in every possible way, photographing her in various poses and raping her as much as he liked. When the victim's body began to decompose, he dismembered it and took the torso on the local cemetery, leaving the head on a hill nearby. He kept the hands and feet to eat them. Deciding that the abuse of the girl's body was not enough, he began to drink the blood from the hands he had left behind, and then eat their flesh. On 11 June, the child's torso without the head, arms and feet was found behind the toilet near the cemetery. Tsutomu later said that he began to worry that the body parts would be found and even wanted to take them back to the apartment, but did not have time. On 22 July of that year, Tsutomu Miyazaki noticed two sisters playing in a park in Hashioji, Tokyo. He persuaded the younger girl to move away from the older one and, after separating the sisters, began taking photographs of the younger one, encouraging her to undress. Who knows how this story might have ended if the girls hadn't been in the park with their father, who had just stepped out for a few minutes. When the man returned and saw what Miyazaki was doing to his youngest daughter, he went mad, attacked the monster and tried to detain him. The pervert tried to escape.
"I won't do it again, so please don't tell the police."
Luckily, an officer on patrol at the time happened to be passing by. He heard the noise and reacted immediately. The girl's father quickly handed the pervert over the officer and told him what had happened. Tsutomu was taken to the Hashioji police station. The monster was eventually stopped. The man who detained Miyazaki thought he had caught a pretty pervert and was shocked to see the monster next to his daughter. Tsutomu Miyazaki later said in an interview that he was very surprised to find himself the culprit in a case of serial kidnapping and murder. He never seems to have positioned himself as a serial killer. In August 1989, Miyazaki's case was officially opened and investigation began. At the same time, officials visited his home. In the room where Miyazaki lived, they found about 6,000 videotapes stuck up to the ceiling. On them, Tsutomu had recorded anime, pornography and slasher films, as well as his victims, or rather, the abuse of their bodies.
"Do you have any hobbies?" "Cameras and tapes." "And where do you shoot?" "In a dark forest."
It was an area a stone's throw from where the fourth incident took place. The investigators needed more evidence. The detectives began an interrogation that lasted 7 hours. Little by little, Miyazaki began to confess, revealing new details of his crimes. He pointed to the place where he had left the head of the third victim, Erika Namba. After investigating the site, the police found a child's skull. This was enough for Miyazaki to be charged with the abduction and murder of minors and transferred to Fukugawa police station, where the murder investigation was based. It was here that Miyazaki continued to tell his story. The Beast told how he kidnapped and strangled children, and how he sent a box of ashes and bones to Marie Kono's parents' house. Tsutomu chose the sloppy style of the letter he sent on behalf of Yuka Amada to confuse the investigation because he wanted to write in a way that humans do not. This is probably another reference to the monster he admired. Even though Miyazaki was caught red-handed, he still expressed surprise at being caught. During the investigation, he behaved as if he felt no guilt for his actions. He never once expressed remorse or apologized to the victims' families. During the trial, Miyazaki accused his alter ego, Red Man, whom he had invented in childhood, of the murders. He even drew him during the court hearings. Tsutomu also described how he roasted the hand of his last victim and ate them. The court dismissed this statement as an attempt to appear insane, so it was not taken into consideration. The hearings began in May 1990. For a long 7 years, they focused on determining Miyazaki's psychological state. As under Japanese law, mentally ill criminals are considered not criminally responsible, and those with cognitive impairments can mitigate their sentences. 3 teams of court psychiatrists worked extensively with Tsutomu Miyazaki, each evaluating his condition differently. Some diagnosed him with schizophrenia, while others with dissociative identity disorder. However, Tsutomu was ultimately found criminally responsible. Miyazaki's fathers refused to pay for a private lawyer for his son. He also could not live with the thought that his child was the monster. So in 1990, he took his own life. When Miyazaki was asked about his father's suicide, he replied,
I think he deserved this punishment.
His mother often visited Tsutomu in prison and brought him manga like Dragon Ball. During this visit, she talked to her son about family matters, avoiding any mentions of his crimes or the court proceedings. Tsutomu showed no interest in talking to her. In court, he referred to his parents very formally as the person who was my mother and the person who was my father. In April 1997, he was sentenced to death by hanging. Despite the rarity of its application in Japan, capital punishment still exists. The defense attempted to contest the sentence, arguing based on his complex psychological state, but in this case, justice prevailed. The Tokyo Supreme Court upheld the death sentence in 2001. 5 years later, in 2006, the Supreme Court signed and finalized the verdict for Tsutomu Miyazaki. During this time, Miyazaki published his correspondence with a newspaper editor named Shinoda, whom he had been writing to throughout his imprisonment, seemingly telling him his story firsthand. In these letters, he repeatedly wrote,
This is absurd. The judge should regret this. He must be an idiot.
And consistently claimed it was a mistake that would be reviewed because his actions were acts of kindness. Speaking about his execution, he remarked,
Then I will only be focused on the fear of inevitable death, though I won't have time to regret my actions.
His conscience showed no remorse whatsoever. In his deeds and words, there was no even a hint of repentance for the brutal murders of 4 children. On June 17, 2008, the sentence was carried out by hanging, ending the life of the serial child killer Tsutomu Miyazaki at the age of 45. In Japan's history, he remains one of the most notorious criminals, nicknamed the Otaku Killer. For those less familiar with anime, the term otaku in Japan refers to someone who dedicates a significant amount of time to their hobbies, which later became associated specifically with anime and manga. Thus, Miyazaki was dubbed this due to his obsession. Following this case, the country was gripped by panic as people began speculating whether the animated films Miyazaki watched had influenced his horrific actions. However, no matter what genre of film or cartoon one enjoys, it does not make them a murder. In Miyazaki's case, a complex set of factors shaped his disturbed psyche and unfortunately led to his sick desires being carried out. Despite Miyazaki being branded the Otaku Killer, Japan's animation industry survived the turbulence caused by his case and gradually became one of the country's cultural landmarks. From Love to Murder, Geisha's Painful Love. The heroine of the next story can also be considered as a part of Japan's national pride, as this woman was among the geishas who are still regarded as a cultural heritage of the country. However, she became famous not for her skills, passion that kills jealousy, or jealousy that kills passion. This woman decided not to choose between the two feelings, but instead to kill her lover and take his most prized part, his genitals. To understand why she did this, let's start from the very beginning of the story. Sara Abe was born in 1905 year in Kanda, district of Tokyo, in a family that was involved in the production and sale of traditional Japanese floor covering, tatami. The family belonged to what could be called the upper middle class. The business was profitable, so they had no financial difficulties. The income from sales allowed the head of the business to comfortably pay wages to employees and also earn a good living. The family was known to be wealthy and respectable, with no conflicts with the police or neighbors. Sara was the 7th children in a family of 8 children, but only 4 survived to adulthood. Until the age of 4, the girl could not speak, likely due to developmental brain issues, though the exact cause is unknown. As a youngest surviving child, Sara was spoiled and greatly loved by her mother. She was enrolled in singing and shamisen, a traditional Japanese instrument lesson. Sarah enjoyed these lessons very much as they were associated with geishas who were very popular at the time. For clarity, let's learn a bit about who geisha are and what they do. A geisha is a traditional entertainer in Japanese culture who entertains clients with conversation, singing, playing music instruments or tea ceremonies. Until the late 18th century, geishas were exclusively men, but later women began to enter profession and today it is considered exclusively female, though there are still men who maintain the tradition. To become geisha, young girls were once given or even sold to an okiya, geisha's house, where they initially served as maids and upon reaching the age of 11-12 began learning the craft themselves. This required great endurance and patience as every step, every moment and every glance had to be perfect. They learned how to walk, talk, sing, dance and be engaging conversationalist. The word geisha literally translates to person of the arts. Geishas were not courtesans as many think. In truly expensive okiya, sex with clients was prohibited. Though there were places without such restrictions where an artist could decide for herself whether to satisfy a client in bed or not. In Sarah's time, geishas were somewhat like pop stars, though considered a low-class profession. However, for Sada Abe, becoming a geisha was a cherished dream, and she often neglected school in favor of singing or dancing lessons. The master said she was learning very well and she was already quite well known in her district. Her mother began dressing her younger daughter as an adult early on. For each lesson, Sada wore a new kimono and styled her hair like a woman 10 years older than her. Parental love and constant expensive gifts seems to elevate her above others, and at 14, Sada voluntarily left school. That same year, she met a student from Keio University who was visiting the neighbor at Are's family. They spent a lot of time together but ended up having forced sex. It was a shocking and painful experience for Sarah, who had not yet had her first period, and she bled for 2 days afterwards. She had to see a doctor to stop it. This even clearly affected her health as she did not have her first period until she was 16. After that, Sada Adi gained a reputation as a rule breaker because everyone knows that you should only marry a virgin, and if you get raped, it's your own fault. The girl did not know what to do next because now no one would really agree to marry her. Young Ari was always depressed and cried a lot. Her mother tried to calm her down by buying her expensive new clothes, but this only made her more irritable. Soon her family began to have problems with the older children, and the question of inheriting the family estate and fortune arose. To prevent Sarah from seeing the problems in the family, her mother gave her younger daughter money and told her to go for a walk, which she did. She then took a large sum of money without her parents' permissions and spent it in Asakusa, Tokyo's main entertainment district. This behavior made her reputation even worse. Her father was very unhappy with her action and often scolded her and put her under house arrest. But it didn't last long, and after her brief imprisonment, Sarah continued to make a name for herself in the entertainment district. Now her life was simple. She woke up at noon, had breakfast, and went out to have fun with a group of similarly unruly teenagers. Sarah also started seeing many boys, but she insisted that she did not have physical relationship with them. She returned home late at night, and the next day everything repeated. At 16, Sarah had to work as a maid to preserve the family honor before her older sister upcoming wedding. However, she was soon fired for stealing rings and a kimono from a lady of the house. The police get involved, registered her, and sent her back home. Her father was so angry that he put Sarah under the house arrest for a whole year. Soon the family went bankrupt, closed their tatami shop, and moved to Saitama. They continued to live off the rent from several of their houses in Tokyo. At 17, an acquaintance advised Sarah to become a geisha if she loved men so much. The girl thought about it and decided, why not? She signed a contract with the Okiya Hajimino in the city of Yokogawa. She took the pseudonym Mayako and started accepting clients. However, as we all remember, girls were taught the art of being a geisha from early childhood, and now 17-year-old girls were full-fledged geishas, while Sara at the same age didn't have enough skills for the job. Her main talent was playing the shamisen, but her entire performance was not perfect. More and more customers forced her to have sex, which she hated. Sara used the money she earned from selling her body as pocket money. While working in various geishas' houses for another 5 years, Sara contracted syphilis from one of her clients. All this meant for her was a lot of extra tests which every licensed courtesan had to undergo. And if she did, at least she could choose a place that paid more. She went to work as a prostitute in a brothel in Osaka, but quickly gained a reputation as a troublesome woman. She frequently stole money from clients and ran away from the brothel after borrowing money there. However, the well-organized system of legal prostitution helped to track her down and bring her back to work quickly. Sara Abe bounced from one brothel to another, each one worse and cheaper than the last. After 2 years of such wandering, she managed to escape and got a job as a waitress. The money here was worse than what Sara earned as a prostitute, and she began to realize she had a sexual addiction. The girl consulted a doctor, complaining that she went crazy if she didn't have physical contact with a man every day, to which she was advised to read a book or get married. In 1932, Sara Abe received news that her mother had died, and the following year her father fell seriously ill. She returned to Tokyo, visited her mother's grave, and then spent 10 days caring for her father until his death. His last words were,
I never thought I would be under your care.
In 1934, Sara Abe was arrested for working in an unlicensed brothel. One of her admirers, Kasahara, posed bail for her and offered to become her lover, to which Sada agreed. The man bought her a house and provided a stable income. However, Abe's addiction did not go away, and she began demanding that Kasahara be with her every night. He recalled,
She was strong and very intelligent, always managing to impress me. But it wasn't enough for her if we did it 2 or 3 times a night. At first, I liked it, but after a couple of weeks, I felt completely exhausted.
Sara Abe asked him to leave his wife and marry her, but Kasahara refused. Then she asked for the possibility to find another lover, which he also denied. Sara Abe ran away from him, full of hatred and disappointment. As she later recounted,
He didn't love me and treated me like an animal. He was a bastard and persuaded me not to leave.
Kasahara was not pleased with this turn of events. Abe's escape enraged him.
She is a prostitute, and by her actions, she shows that she is exactly the kind of woman men should fear.
In 1935, Sara Abe began working as a waitress at a restaurant in Nagoya, where she started a new romance with a customer, Goro Omiya, who was planning to run for the Japanese parliament. However, the restaurant job, which prohibited sexual relations with customers, quickly bored Abe, and she returned to Tokyo. Omiya followed her to the capital and found her. He also suggested she get into the restaurant business, where she could learn management and potentially open her own establishment. Sara Abe took his advice and got a job at the Yoshidaya restaurant. The owner, Kijiko Ishiza, 42-year-old, immediately noticed the new worker and began making advances. Abe, who was not satisfied with having only one lover in front of Omiya, easily succumbed to his caresses, and they had their first physical encounter right in the restaurant during a romantic song performed by a geisha. Both Sara and Ishida were struck by how well they matched. So they agreed to meet at the tea house, which was actually the contemporary version of a love hotel. They planned to spend one night together, but ended up leaving the hotel only after 4 days. And that was to move to another hotel. Their passion did not fade for another 2 weeks as they switched hotels, making love even when the maid entered the room to serve sake. However, when those 2 weeks ended, Ishida returned to his wife. Sarah, on the other hand, began drinking, drowning in jealousy and anxiety for her new lover, whom she believed was her true love. The thought of Ishida being with his wife drove her mad. Abe was convinced that this was the first real love of her life, and she was not about to lose it. These thoughts were hard for her to handle, so to distract herself, Sarah went to the theater to see a play which turned out to be unusually fitting for her situation, in her opinion. In it, a geisha draws a knife from her obi and kills her lover. We all understand that a play is just a play, and however romanticized death may be in it, there is nothing good about it in real life. However, Abe was so captivated by this scheme that she decided to threaten Ishida with the knife at their next meeting. She took her plan seriously, bought her clothes, and used the proceeds to buy a brand new kitchen knife. And the next time she met him, she was not disappointed. Pulling out the knife, Sarah began to threaten Isis, saying she would kill him because he saw her as just another customer. The man was only a little surprised by his lover's actions, and then his face showed satisfaction. Now, during sex, Sarah would put a knife to the base of his penis and tell him that she would never allow him to play with other women, to which he would only smile with satisfaction. They continued their dangerous games, and 2 days later, in the same room, Sarah began to strangle Isis with her belt. But again, the man only enjoyed it. Then they switched and the man was the one doing the strangling. Because of the constant light strangulation, Isis began to have headaches. Oxygen was not getting to his brain, so before going to bed he took 30 painkillers and said to Abe,
Are you planning to put a noose around my neck while asleep? If so, don't hold back, because it hurts a lot afterwards.
She wondered if he really wanted her to kill him. That very night she wrapped an obi, a white belt from a kimono, around his neck and strangled him to death. After that she lay next to the corpse for several hours, feeling, as she later said,
Peace and clarity of mind.
Then she got up, used the same knife to cut off his penis and testicles, which she wrapped in the magazine cover and wrote in blood on his thigh.
We, Zada and Ishida Kichizo, are alone.
Sarah carved her name in his arm. She left the hotel room asking the staff not to disturb Ishida and walked away. She took the man's genitals wrapped in a magazine sheet with her. As the people say, no one will have you. Abe did not want her lover to be with anyone else, and she achieved this in a wild and brutal way. It is unclear whether she planned or whether it all happened spontaneously. But one thing is clear, she showed no sign for atonement for killing the man she claimed to love. The next day, Sarah met her former lover, Omiya. She apologized to him a lot and he thought it was for her infidelity, but it wasn't. It's just that after Isis's body was found, Sada Abe was put on the wanted list and Omiya lost all his career achievements in a single moment for his relationship with a prostitute and a murder, and the path to country's parliament was closed forever. Sada behaved quite calmly for the next 3 days. She went to the cinema and did some shopping. She stayed in a motel under the false name and generally felt no guilt, or at least no remorse. Abe planned to flee to Osaka and commit suicide a week after the murder. She was writing farewell letters to Omiya and Ishida when the police visited her. They had questions about her false name and decided to check it out. The woman did not hide for long.
Don't be so serious. You are looking for Seda Ade, right? I am Seda Ade.
So quite simply, she was detained and a long 8-hour interrogation began, and some of the things she said shocked the officer to the core.
I felt attached to his penis, so I thought I could only die by saying goodbye to him. I took it out, looked at it, put it in my mouth, and even tried to insert it into me. But I failed. But I tried. In the end, I will jump off a cliff on Mount Ikoma with his penis.
When they asked why the genitals, Sarah replied,
Because I couldn't take the head or the body with me. I wanted to take the part that evokes the most vivid memories for me.
The genitals cut off by the killer were transferred to the Pathology Museum of Tokyo Medical University and put on the public display. I don't even know how to comment on this. In December 1936, Abe herself was sentenced to 6 years in prison for murder and mutilation of a corpse. Although the prosecution demanded 10 years and the defendant herself wanted the death penalty.
I regret most that everyone misunderstood me and took me for some sexual deviant. I had men before him, but none evoke the feelings that Ishida did.
This pleasant woman served 5 years out of a 6-year sentence. Toward the end, she was released in honor of a national holiday, and she left the colonies on May 17, 1941. Sarah's older brother, who managed the tatami shop as per family tradition, said he wished Sarah, had ended her life. During the imprisonment, he passed away from illness. After Ishida's death, his wife took over the restaurant, but it was forced to close due to orders restricting establishment serving alcoholic beverages during the Pacific War. Sarah Abe's confession became a national bestseller. Her persona became culturally associated as a popular image of dangerously passionate woman of those years. She started being invited for interviews in magazines and newspapers, and in 1948 she published an autobiography, where she once again emphasized her distorted love for Kichizo Ishida. In 1946, the writer Ango Sakaguchi referred to her as
A warm, tender figure of hope for future generations.
which might not have existed at all if everyone took an example from Sarah Abe. Sakaguchi also interviewed her as an authority on issues of sexuality and freedom. Sarah Abe also participated in the filming of a documentary about herself, which garnered 3 awards after achieving sensational rating in 1976, despite containing many explicit scenes. It is said that the film direction was found Miss Abe with cropped hair in a monastery in western Japan. The exact date of her death remains a mystery, but it is known that she died no earlier than 1971, meaning she was at least 66 years old. Sarah Abe is a good example of how society sometimes put criminals on a pedestal. The image of a strong woman and her desire for freedom, her authority on sexuality, and her unearthly love, this all covers for one simple word: murder, which for some reason people like less than all the above. And yes, we can say that Sarah Abe stumbled, that she was not in the best mental state, that she may have been under the influence of alcohol, that she served 5 years for this mistake. Whether this is enough in a person's life is another question. And now we can romanticize this murder as a dramatic story of a strong woman's passionate love. There is none of that in this story. Murder is always murder. There is no romance, no dramatic music in the background, no way to rewind time. A family quarrel. If the previous story was about lovers who were bound by passionate feelings, the next one is completely opposite, as it tells of the hatred between a brother and sister that escalated into a brutal murder. The girl in the photo is Azumi Muto. Here she is taking her first steps toward her desired career as an actress, but she will become known throughout Japan and beyond as the sister whose body was torn apart by her own brother. In order to solve the case of the sister murder, it is necessary to find out what kind of family both the victim and the killer grew up in. So the relationship in the Muto family could be described as cold. Mamoru Muto's father ran his own dental clinic for 62 years, and his wife also worked as a dentist, but in different location, which to me says a lot. The children in the family were already old enough to choose their future professions, and, of course, their father insisted they study to become dentists. Two elder sons upheld the family tradition, but their daughter, Azumi, chose a different path. She started a career as a model and actress, which naturally angered her parents. Constant arguments disrupted the peace at home for the girl. Her older brother supported her. While their parents argued among themselves, he did what he could to support his younger siblings. Sometimes through conversation, sometimes by covering up their antics from their parents. On the contrary, Azumi found her middle brother, Yuki, to be a perpetual problem. They never found common ground and often quarreled. Yuki aimed to follow his father and elder brother's footsteps by enrolling in a dental course at university. He had average grades in school, so perhaps he fell slightly short of the required score and did not pass the entrance exam for his desired university. This failure deeply attacked Yuki, and he consistently fretted over his misfortune. His sister only worsened things with her criticism. For Azumi, life at her parents' house became increasingly stifling. Her older brother later revealed that she had cut her veins more than once and often run away from home. The constant quarrels with her parents and brother left her feeling trapped, so she decided to run away and strike out on her own. She did so in December 2004, at the age of 18. The girl adopted the stage name Kakeru Takamine and slowly began moving toward her dream. However, she returned home in May 2005 simply because she hadn't yet earned enough to live independently. In 2006, Azumi landed a small supporting role in a film titled Cream Lemon. The film was shocking for the Muto parents, as it portrayed a love story between siblings. This role did not improve Azumi's relationship with her family, but it was a step forward in her career. She also appeared several times on stage in theater playing minor roles. However, becoming a professional actress was not destined for her. On December 30, 2006, her mother and eldest son went to their hometown nearby. New Year in Japan differs from ours. People there do not celebrate it with a great pomp, just a simple dinner, and on the first date of this year, they go to the shrine to pray for blessing in the new year. So, her mother and son went to their hometown to visit relatives and pray at their small local shrine. Meanwhile, their father stayed overnight at work because he was delayed until late and did not want to drive home at night. Yuki entered the living room where his younger sister was watching TV. They typically ignored each other, but Yuki felt that his sister was mocking him. An argument ensued, during which the girl, as always, pointed out to her brother that he would never achieve anything because he had no dreams and he studied poorly, failing to pass the entrance exam. She said,
"I have a dream, so I can achieve it. But you, Yuki, you have none. You will never measure up to me."
Yuki hated his sister for this. It seemed that no matter how hard he tried to study better, all his achievements were automatically reduced by nothing. Meanwhile, his sister always boasted about going against their parents' wishes and choosing a different profession. The quarrel moved from the living room on the second floor to Yuki's room on the third. The boy's patience ran out, so he grabbed a wooden sword and hit her on the head, and she fell down. The boy was scared, but not because she was dead. On the contrary, he was afraid that she might still be alive, and he was right. Azumi was still moving, trying to get up. But her brother didn't let her. Yuki pinned her to the floor and began to choke her until she softened under him. If there was still a chance that Azumi might have survived before, it was obvious that she was dead. Nevertheless, Yuki continued to panic, worried about whether she was really dead. So he took the body to the bathroom and put her head under the water to drown her, just to be on the safe side. After turning off the water and completely submerging Azumi's body in the bathtub, the guy started to panic. What to do now? Where to put the body? He couldn't take it out of the house without being noticed, so the solution was obvious. Yuki quickly went around the house, gathering everything he needed, and a few minutes later returned to the bathroom. He was holding a knife, a saw, and black garbage bags. Mamoru Muto, the father of the family, returned home on December 31, where everything seems to be in its place. He asked Yuki about his sister, to which he replied that he didn't know. That day Yuki was supposed to go to a preparatory camp, but before leaving he told his father,
My pet shark which my friend gave me died yesterday, so please don't enter my room, even if you smelled something bad.
His father simply agreed, not suspecting that there wasn't a dead fish in Yuki's room at all. The mother and eldest son returned home on January 2, already in the new year of 2007. It seemed that everything was as usual at home, nothing had changed. Yuki was at the camp and Azumi wasn't home. However, this was not unusual for the mother, as her daughter often went somewhere without warning. So the family was busy with their own affairs all day, but in the evening, the mother started to smell a strange, unpleasant odor coming from her younger son's room. Around 9 p.m., she finally decided to check what was causing this stench. To her horror, she found several packages in her son's clothes. About an hour later, the father called the police and reported that he had found his daughter's body. In Yuki Muto's room, police found over 10 packages containing body parts scattered throughout his room, placed in various locations. Some body parts were in bags, others in packages. It was evident that the killer tried to hide the remains of his victim from praying eyes, stuffing the pieces into any suitable bag he could find. As forensic experts pieced together the mutilated body like a distorted puzzle, they could not definitively determine the cause of death. There were bruises on the arms and legs, a depressed skull fracture from a blunt object, signs of strangulation on the neck, an indication of drowning. Additionally, the chest and lower abdomen were severed and not found in any package. On January 4, 2007, the second son of the Muto family was arrested on suspicion of murder. He cited as an argument with his sister as a motive for the killing. In the police station, he confessed that he became very angry when Azumi started teasing him, so he couldn't control himself and struck her on the head with a wooden sword. While this initial outburst might be attributed to an emotional surge beyond his control, his subsequent actions were solely aimed to ensuring that his sister would not rise again. To conceal the body, Yuki dismembered it into many parts, utilizing his knowledge of anatomy. He also severed Azumi's chest and part of her abdomen to make it difficult for the police to determine the victim's gender and identify her. These severed pieces of flesh he flushed down the drain in pots. He meticulously cleaned all traces of blood in his and the bathroom, straightened up his clothes, and cleaned and returned the saw and knife used to dismember the body to their original places. The court hearing for Yuki Muto began in May 2008. The prosecution initially sought 17 years of imprisonment, but the defense was able to argue that Yuki had dissociative identity disorder and the murder and dismemberment were committed by his alter ego. This reduces his sentence to 7 years of imprisonment. However, on April 28, 2009, the case was reviewed in the Tokyo High Court, which dismissed the possibility of multiple personalities and set a new sentence of 12 years. At the time of Azumi Muto's death, she was 20 years old, and her brother, the killer, was 21. These stories today prove that not all monsters hide in dark alleys at night. Sometimes they may appear pleasant, like a midwife with a camera or a studious medical student. People are just people, and among them, there can always be a monster. Thank you for watching this video till the end. I hope you found it interesting to watch and listen to. Remember, it's not too difficult for you. Always stay human. Avoid doing things you'll regret. Otherwise, you might end up like heroes of this video. Take care of yourself, my dear ones, until we meet again.